Well, if that wasn't just the most appropriate way for that game to go and for the first half of the season to end, hello, everybody. Welcome back for the latest live edition of the Just Mets podcast, hosted by the Believe Podcast Network. My name is Rich MacLeod. I'm coming to you solo this week for our weekly recap. Andrew Claudio, my co-host, is in Las Vegas right now for NBA Summer League because the Knicks season really has never stopped at any point, seamlessly going from the 2026 right into the 2027 season. So it's just me this week. Might be a little bit of a shorter show, but we're going to be recapping the end of the first half of the season, which what felt like maybe the longest first half to any Mets season ever. Definitely, in my experience, probably one of the longest first halves I can remember. 2017, 2018 were bad. 2009 was bad, but some of those seasons you had a glimmer of hope. It wasn't so over so early on where this team, after getting swept by the Red Sox over the weekend, we're coming live about 40, 50 minutes after the finale of the Red Sox series, which ended with the Mets blowing a game fairly spectacularly in the ninth inning before losing in extras. We'll get to that in a second. But after this game, the Mets are now 40-57 on the year. That is 17 games under 500, 15 and a half games back in the division, 12 games out of the last wild card spot. Remember, there are 3 now. They are also 8 games out of 4th place in the division. A division featuring the Miami Marlins and the Washington Nationals, both well ahead of the Mets. The Marlins are 12 games ahead of the Mets in the standings for third. The Nationals, 8 games ahead of the Mets. Pretty incredible when you take a step back and soak it all in. But I think, it's funny. I saw Steve Gelbs right after the game today called the Mets lost a stunning collapse. And if you've been watching the Mets since the start of the season, if you've been watching the Mets even for the last couple of days, is anybody really surprised at this point? Is anybody really emotionally affected or deeply bothered by the game-to-game things happening right now? I would say no. The majority of us, I think, have probably done the healthier thing and kind of emotionally let go. I'm still watching most of these games. Every single pitch. I listened to the game today. I put my money where my mouth was after last week's episode where we talked about sorry, I was looking at the chat. The reasons to keep watching or listening, and I had talked about, really taking in as much Howie Rose as we get left because there's really not much left. So I listened to today's game entirely on the radio. Really threw me back to when I was a kid, but just because I'm watching every day, just because we're still analyzing and we're doing the podcasts every week. Supposed to be twice this past week, but technical issues wiped out the midweek pod because I recorded the entire thing with no audio, so that was really, really awesome. But we do all that stuff, and I still invest the time, but in terms of the emotions, I think for most people that's probably shut off. You find the little things to enjoy, like Zach Thornton on Sunday, who was pretty awesome. Goes 7 shutout innings, gives up no runs, leaves with a 2-0 lead. He also threw 80 pitches, high 70s in pitches, so he was remarkably efficient. This is not the first time we've seen him do this either. He came up about a month ago and faced the Phillies and pitched very, very well in that game. I believe that was 6 innings, either maybe 1 run. If I remember correctly, he was really good in that game. Didn't throw a lot of pitches either. Looks like he'll stick in the major leagues. Stuff like that, stuff like AJ Ewing continuing to look like a budding superstar and what Carson Benj has been able to do. That's the stuff I think you take pleasure in and invest some more emotions in. But, when the Mets blow a game like they did on Sunday, or they lose a game where they score 12 runs on offense like they did to start the week against the Royals, it's easier to just, I guess, let it kind of like brush it off your shoulders and move on with your day, because there's just not that much to, what is there left to get upset about, I guess, is kind of how I feel about the entire thing, because this team's been bad since almost the very beginning. I can't remember a Mets season that was over before April was out. We tried to hold on to the fact that they played decent in May, but the hole that they had dug themselves in was so deep that decent wasn't going to even get them close to being out of it. And what happened was they essentially maintained for May and the first few days of June before they went back into the tank. And before you knew it, they went from, what were they, 7-4 to start the year. Then they're 11 games under 500. They got as close to 6 games under 500, I believe, at some point in May and June. Never got closer than that, and now they are a ridiculous 17 games under 500. They are, let's check the rest of the league. They have the second most losses in the National League. The only team worse than the Mets are the Rockies, who are only 1 game worse than the Mets. They have 58 losses. They lost their last game of the first half. And then only 2 teams in the National League or in the American League are worse than the Mets and the Rockies, which is the Royals and the Angels, who both have 59 losses this season. So the Mets are they're third. They have the third worst record in Major League Baseball. The only teams worse are the Rockies, the Angels, and the Royals, all teams that you didn't expect to be any good this year, and especially for Colorado and LA, you thought would probably be quite bad again. They have had a history of being pretty awful. So not a great place that the Mets are in, but we've known this for a while, and it just changes the calculus. It changes the way that we analyze and talk about this team moving forward. So we'll talk about some of the stuff that happened over the past week. I don't see any value in doing a game-by-game analysis at this point. Like I said, the Mets are 17 games under 500 now. They lose their final 3 of the first half after getting swept by the Red Sox, a Red Sox team who didn't take off from Chicago until 3 or 4 p.m. of the day they were playing the Mets. They actually had to delay the start of that game because the Red Sox got in so late, and the Mets lost that game. The Mets also lost a game earlier in the week against the Royals, where in the first inning, the Mets hit a ball that never left the infield on 3 different throws. They score all 3 runs. They lose that game 16-12. What are some of the other headlines of the week? Mark Vientos breaks a bone in his hand. He gets hit by a pitch. So any dreams of trading him in the next few weeks probably go down. That doesn't mean I think they're keeping him forever, but it just seems to be like one of those things of like, yeah, of course, now Vientos gets hurt when, we'd actually like to potentially move him for something, even if it was a small something. Jorge Polanco came back, something I thought would never happen. Of course, he can't get the runner over in extra innings on Sunday, but what a surprise. I think he's 3 for 17 since coming off the injured list. He has exclusively played DH so far, which does make sense. Freddie Peralta still sucks. I know his fastball had more zip on it on Saturday, but 3 straight starts from Freddie Peralta where, my God, I talked so much shit about 5-frame Freddie famously on this podcast earlier in the season. Now I pine for the days of 5-frame Freddie, because the last 3 starts he's made, he hasn't even gotten to 5. He goes, 4 1/3 in the start he made this week. Before that, he went, I think, 3 2/3 and then 4 1/3 again, something like that. It's the kind of stuff, like similarly to the Vientos thing, where it pisses you off two ways, because Freddie Peralta and Mark Vientos, to an extent, their performances have been so bad. It is the reason why the Mets are in such a hole where they're going to need to sell these same players. And yet they're also performing so bad that it's kind of nuking their trade value. I still think you might get something decent for Peralta because the need for starting pitchers every year is just so desperate. And as we saw last year, there's so many times where there's just not that much out there, and there's every team could use a starting pitcher. So it does give you some negotiating power as the seller. But the more Freddie Peralta goes out there and does what he did on Saturday and does what he has done so often since joining the Mets, it just continues to decrease the value and hurt your leverage. So not surprised again. It's been going on for a while. Kind of started right there on opening day when he gave up that home run right away of like, something feels off here. And if you felt that way, for once you weren't being overly negative, you probably were correct and had some good intuition there. But Sean Manaea and Zach Thornton both went 7 innings, which is pretty awesome. Thornton, the rookie, should have never gotten sent down after the last start he made against the Phillies, but Andy Green, interim manager for the Mets, confirmed after Sunday's game that Thornton will stay in the rotation, at least coming out of the All-Star break. I honestly don't see any good reason, a single good one, why Thornton, shy of him getting injured or risking blowing through an innings limit on the season, why he wouldn't be guaranteed a rotation spot for the rest of the season. The Mets aren't playing for anything. They are likely going to sell from this rotation, whether it's just Freddie Peralta or, maybe they do more. Maybe Senga, who's in this weird role that also isn't working right now, they could move on from him. There's a shot that they could move on from Clay Holmes, but he also is apparently open to an extension, and the Mets are apparently open to extension. Per Chelsea Jane earlier this week from SNY. So he could potentially stick around for the long haul or get moved in the next few weeks. So you're going to have even more spots to fill. And, through just like a handful of major league starts against really good teams, that by that matter, Zach Thornton's shown a lot more than a lot of these other Mets starting pitchers have. And I would much rather see this kid go out there every 5 days and throw over, Huascar Brazoban or Adam Warren or, insert reliever A and doing one of these horrible, awful bullpen games, which I very much don't enjoy. They're hard to watch. And again, big shout out to Sean Manaea too, who he's not throwing as hard as he did, but he's really kind of thrown it back to that 2024 version of him that we saw. I'm actually going to pull up and see what his numbers have been like lately, because he honestly very quietly has been really good, other than maybe one bad outing over this last month, maybe even longer at that point. He started the season so poorly, it kind of hides a lot of the progress that he's made. But okay, it hasn't been as good as I'm saying, but it does look like, let's see. Okay, since the beginning of May, Sean Manaea has made 13 appearances, some obviously out of the bullpen, some as a starter. In those 13 appearances, he's pitched 53 innings, 3.74 ERA, 4.02 FIP, like super, super serviceable. His ERA before that excuse me. I put in the wrong date, so it should actually be slightly better. So Manaea's last 12 outings, going back to May 10th, he's pitched 52 and 2/3 innings, has a 3.59 ERA and a 4.01 FIP, like very, very serviceable, very, very solid. And yeah, I mean, it's he's not blowing anybody away. You're not going to fool yourself into him being the ace like we might have done in the second half of 2024, but he's giving you more than you probably expected coming into the year, and definitely more than you expected after we saw how he looked in spring training and how he looked over the first few weeks, if not 2 months of the season. So big shout out to Mania, our tribal king. Good to see that from him. The MLB draft happened. I am not an MLB draft expert, but dropping on Wednesday, we will be having a special bonus episode of the podcast because we're not doing a midweek show this upcoming week because it is the All-Star break. But there will be a second episode that's coming out where Ernest Dove from the Dove Report will be joining me to talk about, Mets prospects who haven't panned out, who are on their way out, and then also the state of the system right now, the draft that just took place. So we'll talk about all that stuff. Excited to have Ernest on the show. So I won't get into the draft now. I do just think that it's weird that they host the draft in like the middle of the afternoon while other games are being played. It's the only sport that has their draft during the actual season. And I know that's because of the just alignment with when the college baseball season ends is very different. But at least, like, can you give it its own night? You're doing it a few days before the All-Star break anyways. Why not host the MLB draft on Wednesday night, which is the one night where nothing happens during the All-Star break because the Derby's on Monday. The game itself is on Tuesday. Wednesday is just a full off day. Would be a very easy switch to just make the MLB draft happen Wednesday night when nothing else is going on, and anybody who likes baseball can tune into that because it's not competing with anything else in its own sport. So very strange, but we'll get more into the draft on that episode that's going to come out on Wednesday morning. Lindor and Devin Williams on Sunday, really they blew the game. And it's unfortunate for Lindor because he's been going through a lot. We're going to talk about him in a little bit in a different light, but a lot of noise about him recently. Obviously, Steve Cohen a couple of weeks ago confirming the stuff with him and Soto, so that hasn't quieted down. If anything, that's ramped up. John Heyman and some others. Again, we'll get to this, but wild, rampant speculation about certain trades that are obviously not going to happen. So that's been getting talked about a lot. Lindor has also just struggled this year. He got off to one of the worst starts of his career, though we know that he always gets off to bad starts in the season. It's just what he does. It's not the first guy we've seen. Mark Teixeira, he was like a guarantee to go 0 for April every year for the Yankees. But he got off to the bad start, misses like 2 months with the calf injury, comes back, and it's been, pretty slow goings for him. Has a good day at the plate. He was having a bad week offensively, but, hits an RBI double off the wall, hits a home run. He's accountable for the sole 2 Met runs that they had on the day. So it was like a full Lindor put the team on his back game. And then in the 9th inning, up 2-0, a guy on first base and 1 out, Devin Williams gets what should be as routine as a game-ending double play ball as Francisco Lindor's ever seen. He's a great glove. He has been his entire career. And he just completely boots the ball. He falls down trying to get it back up. Everybody's safe. And then naturally, because Devin Williams, God forbid, he pick up a teammate, walks the next hitter to load the bases, walks the next hitter to force in a run. It makes it 2-1. Next guy gets a bloop hit to tie the game. Williams was very fortunate that the next batter after that lined into an inning double play because God knows how many more runs could have been tacked onto Williams' ledger. Again, not entirely his fault. He did get the double play ball to end the game, but just because Lindor booted it doesn't mean you have to walk the next guy and the next guy and give up a hit to the guy after that. You can do your part as well. So it's unfortunate that that's how it goes. Of course, what happens it felt like this was the 800th extra inning game of this season. Mets go into extra innings after that. They don't score naturally in the bottom of the ninth. I don't even think they had. Did they get a base runner? I don't even remember. But they don't score. They go into extras. The Red Sox scratch across just one run, which, like, if you're the home team and you're pitching, you just give up the one run, and it was just on moving the runner to third and then getting him home on a sac fly. As the pitching team, it's kind of a win. You've got the advantage, but I think just the way this entire first half of the season has gone for the Mets, other than bad starting pitching, which we didn't see in this game did kind of feel like it represented the first half as a whole. It just felt very, very appropriate that this first half came to an end in a game where defense, Devin Williams, and largely ice cold offense cost them a chance at a win, and they lose in somewhat brutal fashion. Again, if this were early in the season, if this were a year where the Mets were more competitive, I think that's just about as bad as you can end a first half of baseball with and go into the All-Star break and have that like sit and simmer inside of you. But because they're so out of it, it's just like, all right, okay, like it's another loss. It's what I said on the show last week where, hey, stick around because the Mets will probably invent some ways to lose that you haven't really seen before. We saw them lose a 16-12 game earlier in the week. I wouldn't say what happened on Sunday against the Red Sox was entirely new, but it was certainly interesting, and it's unfortunate. I wish it wasn't so, but this is the reality that we're in, and that's how the game went. And the Mets obviously just have tie the knot there. They did not score in the bottom of the 10th, down 3-2, and they didn't even move the runner away from second base, which is something we've seen them do far too many times in these many extra inning games this past, or honestly in this entire first half. Trying to think of the other things that we had to talk about from this past week. We had that clip of Keith Hernandez, which I'm currently looking to see if I can pull that up. Where essentially the Mets are so bad that it made Keith Hernandez have some sort of an existential crisis live on the air. If I can track that down somewhere, that would be lovely. But it's looking like... Oh, do I have it? I do have it. Okay, give me one moment, and I'm going to pull this up because the Mets have not been a very particularly entertaining product this season. So when there are these moments, I feel like we have to take full advantage of them. So basically, in the first game of the week, this was the beer league slugfest kind of game between the Mets and the Royals. At one point, the Mets were up 3-0 from that little league home run that happened in the first. I think they were up 5-0 and then 9-4. At this point in the game, the Royals have come back. They've now tied the game 9-9. And in the middle of this, I don't remember how this came up. Keith Hernandez seemed to have some sort of familial existential crisis. It's the best booth in baseball. Like the Mets are so bad that it made Keith Hernandez start talking about the end of his line, how his line is burned for all of eternity. The season's been so shitty and so miserable, but the Mets broadcasters, man, like they really do make it worth tuning in, because the same way, you watch these games and in a negative way, you never know what you're going to see because the Mets will find a new way to do something inept is the same way that you never know what you're going to hear on these broadcasts, specifically when Keith Hernandez is in the booth. It's just, I just had to play it because that man had a honest to God existential crisis in the middle of a 9-9 baseball game with runners on base too. This was in the midst of that Royals big rally against Brazaban in the bullpen. So that happened this week. Oh God, I guess we got to talk about this. Brandon Nimmo chants. We got Brandon Nimmo chants during the Royals series by the Mets fans. And like, I'm not going to come here and say what fans shouldn't do. Specifically in seasons like this, I think booing is like, I'm not a booer, but I'm also not going to, give people lectures about booing. I think if there were ever a year and a circumstance to boo, this is a pretty good one. So I understand booing. I understand fire David Stern's chants. I think it's pretty lame, but I could even understand the Pete Alonso chants, even though I think, again, I've said this many, many times. To me, it's not about losing Alonso. It's about the failure to replace him. There were many, many options between Murakami and Okamoto and Wilson Contreras and Christian Walker and Ryan O'Hearn, who just had a 10 RBI game for the Pirates the other day. Probably even more, but I just listed 4 or 5 extremely good options there, especially compared to what the Mets have had at that position. But again, I get it. Mets first base situation has been bad. Pete Alonso is having like a classic Pete Alonso type season, which the Mets could use. Obviously, wouldn't dig them out of this. They're just way too bad for it to have that much of an impact, but I get it. Chanting for Brandon Nimmo, and I saw some people trying to say like, well, it's not really about Brandon Nimmo. Like, you're chanting the guy's name. I think it might be about Brandon Nimmo. I just don't understand that chant, because if there is one single thing to hang your hat on for the Mets in this awful, awful lost season, it's the fact that they probably have the best outfield in baseball right now, which would not have happened if Brandon Nimmo was still on the team. Look, I get Marcus Semien is dog shit. He's terrible. But if you're just talking about the fact that, like, hey, the Mets miss Brandon Nimmo, we should still have Brandon Nimmo on the team, I just completely disagree. I know he got off to that crazy start at the beginning of the year with the Rangers, where every night people were updating his stats. Oh, he's got a 900 OPS. Oh, 950. Oh, it's over 1,000. Like, look how stupid the Mets and David Stearns looks. Have you seen any of those tweets in a while? No. Well, it's probably because in this first 14 games of the season, Brandon Nimmo was hitting 364, 435, 618 with 3 home runs and a 1,054 OPS. That is over his first 14 games. I'm going to pull up the updated stats because when I gathered this was a couple of days ago. After those first 14 games where everybody was declaring the Mets idiots for getting rid of Brandon Nimmo, 75 games have been played, not even including Sunday because the stats haven't updated. In those 75 games since, Brandon Nimmo is hitting 238 with a 306 on base, a 378 slugging, and a 684 OPS with 6 home runs. AJ Ewing has been awesome. He would not be here if Brandon Nimmo was still here. Carson Bench has been really good lately. He might not be here if Brandon Nimmo is here. Juan Soto, other than that drop he had on Friday, is having the best defensive season he has had in the outfield since 2021. That would not be possible if Brandon Nimmo is still here. Let's also compare Nimmo, who's played a full season, to AJ Ewing, who by comparison has played significantly less because he didn't make his MLB debut until about June. AJ Ewing has a 1.3 F4 this season. Compare that to Brandon Nimmo, 1.2. So despite the fact that F4, if you're unfamiliar, WAR in general, is a cumulative stat, which means the more you play, the more you're going to rack up either positively or negatively. So in WAR, you are at a severe disadvantage if you've played less games. It's not like OPS where you go 2 for 2 and you have a perfect OPS. You have to rack this up over time. So despite the fact that AJ Ewing has played about half the time as Brandon Nimmo has this season, he has already surpassed him in F4. He also has a better weighted runs created plus. AJ Ewing's at 125 compared to Brandon Nimmo, who is at 110. If you're unfamiliar with that stat, 100 is league average. So AJ Ewing's 25% better than the league average. Brandon Nimmo is only 10% better. I don't want to hear about Brandon Nimmo anymore. I also don't want to hear about Jeff McNeil. I mean, nobody's talking about him because why? I think he is the fourth or third least valuable player, position player in baseball this season. And I don't want to hear about Brandon Nimmo anymore, man. Like, they got back a shit return. And if you want to take issue with that, I think that is completely fair. But also you have to know that Brandon Nimmo had 5 years and $100 million left on his deal and a full no trade clause. So if that was the best that the Mets were ever going to be able to do, and it was just about getting rid of him to make room for this outfield, it's at least a little bit more palatable. And Nimmo's got 4 years left after this one. It's already looking like, the Mets got out at the right time on Brandon Nimmo. One last thing I want to talk about, then we'll get into the segments, and then there's some chats and I think some super chats to get through. So a few more things to go through. But as I take a drink of water, preparing to talk a lot more. I alluded to this at the top of the show, but there was a lot of buzz, I guess buzz this week about trading Francisco Lindor. This seemed to start with John Heyman throwing it out there that while Steve Cohen said on his show that they wouldn't be trading him, that the Mets should consider it. It then got escalated because you had the Mike Francesas of the world reporting, quote unquote, and heavy sarcasm on that word right there. But reported, some things about the Mets trying to get rid of Lindor to the point where Ken Rosenthal had to come out and say that that wasn't true and dispel that. You then, of course, the talking heads get into it even more. So you had Boomer Esiason saying the Mets need to trade Francisco Lindor. What a surprise that Boomer has that opinion. A lot of hosts get in on the action. And then you get fucking guys like Brandon Tierney coming out here, again, pounding their chest like the same way he did in 2024, where he eventually got proven so wrong. They have to trade Lindor. He's not a leader. This isn't his team. Blah, 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 blah. It's such a bunch of bullshit. And I never want to hear another word out of Brandon Tierney's fucking mouth ever again. This guy comes out, and again, he was one of many, but I'm gonna focus on him for a second because it's nonsense. These people know what they're doing. They are engagement farming. They are rage baiting, and they also have massive fucking egos. And it's just Brandon Nimmo literally just hit a walk-off for the Rangers. That's hilarious. Sorry, I clearly have ADHD and was distracted by Twitter. But these guys have an agenda. They know what they're doing. And, you had Tierney come out the other day and say, because a fan had said he's had it out for Lindor for years, and he did it throughout 2024. He was ripping him apart, saying he should give up switch hitting, saying that his bad starts are, he's alluding that his bad starts are so bad that, what he does later in the season almost doesn't matter because he put them in the hole that they're in, like something stupid like that. And, he came out and said, again, that the Mets need to trade this guy and this, that, and the other thing. And this guy had said he'd had it out for years. And he said, yeah, I was right then and I'm right now. And to that, I would just like to introduce this line of evidence, which is a tweet from Brandon Tierney during the 2024 season, at the end of the 2024 season, who said, I could not have been more wrong about Lindor. I will happily own it. Not only is he a great player, but he's also one of the highest character athletes around. Respect. I was right all along, except for the time that I said I was wrong. Like, is this my best rant or takedown of anybody? No, but it just really fucking got under my skin and annoyed me. And my more analytical and just statistically based reasoning behind not wanting to trade Lindor, I think, might be a little bit more interesting. And I just look at it, and one, it's stupid, and these guys are stupid for saying it. And I don't respect the game. I recognize what they're doing, but I don't respect it. But from a realistic point of view here, just look at the state of shortstop in Major League Baseball. Like, who are you getting? This is a league where the Braves gave Hyun-Sung Kim $20 million for one season to play shortstop. Look at the Mets in the minor leagues. Where's the shortstop that's anywhere close? Jet Williams is gone. AJ Ewing's not a shortstop. Ronnie Mauricio has not developed at all. They haven't helped him in that regard either. They're not filling it internally. It's almost impossible to fill it externally right now because the good ones don't even get close to free agency, and you're not going to be able to trade for those guys either. JJ Weatherholt for the Cardinals has been excellent as a rookie this year. Already extended him 8 years. Like, it is very, very difficult to find an average shortstop, let alone an elite shortstop on both sides of the ball. And when you have that, you don't give it up. It is not the same impact as a quarterback in football because obviously the quarterback controls much more than an individual baseball player, but having a great shortstop and having a great center fielder is almost like having a great quarterback. Teams don't let those guys leave. And look at the hell that you can get in trying to solve that. Look at what the Yankees have been dealing with Anthony Volpe for the last 3 years. Got to the point where they talked themselves into Jose Caballero being a great starter. And it was just because it wasn't Anthony Volpe. It is exceedingly hard to find a shortstop anywhere close to Francisco Lindor. You think the Guardians, other than the money side of things, which obviously influenced that decision, you think they love the return they got back for Francisco Lindor? You think they properly, at the height of his value, you think that the Guardians getting Ahmed Rosario, Andres Jimenez, and the pitcher Wolf, you think that was adequate value for peak value, peak of his powers, Francisco Lindor? You think the Mets are going to do better than that return now, where Francisco Lindor has aged significantly more? He's 4 or 5 years older than he was when that trade was made. He is more expensive. The Mets were acquiring him with 1 year left of team control before they extended him. Now he's got 5, 6 years left right now. So he's aged, and he's more expensive, and he's under control for much longer. and you think you're going to do better than that return that the Guardians got 5 years ago, which in retrospect is a horrible return. How about looking at the Nationals? Yes, they're having a fun first half right now. They're a couple of games over 500, I think, although they did get swept by the Yankees to end the first half. But they traded Juan Soto, maybe the most valuable trade asset we've ever seen in Major League Baseball. And they traded him with more than 1 year left of team control. They got C.J. Abrams, Mackenzie Gore, James Wood, Robert Hassel III, Harlan Susanna, and then the veteran Luke Voit. Of those 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 players that they got, let's count out Luke Voit because he was just a veteran throw-in. Mackenzie Gore was traded to the Rangers this past offseason. Robert Hassel was, I believe, just released by the Nationals today as we're recording this episode. So he is no longer in the organization. Harlan Susanna was in single A last season and is injured and has not appeared since last year. So that leaves C.J. Abrams, who's really, really good, and James Wood, who is an absolute star. So the Nationals got all those pieces back. I'd say they got two pieces of significance back. And you could say the core of their, the new core of their team. But since making that trade, the Nationals were 20 games under 500 in 2023. They were 20 games under 500 in 2024. They were 30 games under 500 in 2025. And now today, after getting swept by the Yankees, they are 1 game under 500. So let's do a little quick math there. If they're 48 and 49 this season, this is great podcasting, I know. But we're doing live math because my stats are out of date. But so since the Juan Soto trade, the Nationals are 256 and 327, which is 71 games under 500. Their rebuild went so bad they had to blow it up last year and start their rebuild again. This is what happens when you trade these superstar players. Even if you get back eventual stars, which the Nationals did, if you get 6 minor league guys and 2 of them are stars and one looks like a superstar, that is about as great of a return as you are ever going to get. And it has not impacted winning in the slightest for the Nationals. So when you look at the Nationals example and you look at what Francisco Lindor was already traded for when he was far more valuable as an asset 5 years ago by Cleveland, how can you look me in the face and say the right thing to do for the New York Mets is to trade Francisco Lindor? You're not going to get the value he deserves back. It will not help you win baseball games. It just makes no sense. And you will not be able to replace him via your farm system as it stands right now, or likely via free agency or the trade market, because people don't give up good shortstops. So seriously, honestly, tell me, why should the Mets trade Francisco Lindor? Other than the fact that some people just don't fucking like him because of his politics or because of where he's from. Like, I'm just going to say it like it is. So anyways, it's kind of my spiel. I went way longer than I thought on the past week, but I guess there was a lot of shenanigans amidst everything. We'll do quick hitters on the weekly segments, and then I do want to get in the comment section because there are quite a few of you in here today. Curtain call. Let me get our banners up here. Time for our curtain call, which is the weekly segment that we do when a Mets, a person or player with the Mets did so well that we want them to go up to the top step and get a curtain call. It's hard to it's hard to do the curtain calls. Lately, I think AJ Ewing is a very, very strong candidate. I think most weeks he would probably get it. Carson Benj is up there as well. But I want to give it to Zach Thornton. I know he only made the one start this week, but he gets called up. He hasn't pitched in the major leagues in a couple of months, where he only got called up for one start then and got sent right back down. He comes up against a team in the Red Sox that's won 8 straight games. Their offense has been humming. It's his second start in the big leagues this year. And he goes out there and he gives you 7 shutout innings and easily could have gone into the 8th if the Mets allotted him to. He was awesome. And he was awesome the last time that he got called up to basically do this exact same thing. I'm very happy to see that Thornton will stay in the rotation, as I said at the top of the show. Barring an injury or he is like the worst pitcher in the history of baseball, even then I probably would just leave him in there. But shy of those things, he should be in the rotation for the rest of the year. There's not enough starting pitching with the Mets, especially after this trade deadline, to justify taking him out. He is a potential, mid to back end guy that you want to, have let a trial run for this next 2.5, 3 months at this point. Like right now, this team is all about evaluation mode for 2027. Who's going to be here and who needs to go? This is the time to do that stuff. So Zach Thornton gets my curtain call. I'm excited to watch him down the stretch. It's these young guys who are, for me at least, it's the biggest reason to keep watching. So him going out there, like it's a real bummer that Lindor and Williams cost him his opportunity for his first career win. He will get more opportunities, especially if he pitches like this. So really cool to watch that happen. I thought he was great, and I'm excited to see him pitch again after the All-Star break. El Stinko, our favorite segment, is the weekly segment that we do to highlight, somebody who was so bad that Keith Hernandez, had to drop an El Stinko on the broadcast. There was always a lot of candidates for these, and I hope that this will show my fairness and what I hope to be my balance as a person who analyzes and talks about this baseball team, that I could just go on a 10 to 15 minute rant in defense of this guy and also give him my El Stinko, because my El Stinko is Francisco Lindor. He should stay on the Mets until his contract is through. He should be a lifelong Met at this point. Lifelong Met since they acquired him. They shouldn't let him appear in another uniform at this point. But that being said, he hasn't had a great year, and he had a bad week. Despite the home run and the 2 RBIs on Sunday, Lindor did just go 4 for 19 this past week, which is a 211 batting average. 2 of those hits were today on the last game. His home run and 2 RBIs are the only runs that he drove in this week as well. So not great offensively. And then the killer error that it truly cost the Mets this game. Williams should have picked him up, and I gave Williams a lot of shit earlier. But if Lindor makes that play, which he makes, 99 times out of 100, the game ends right there. The Mets have like a nice little win going to the All-Star break. They have a 500 week. Andrew would have won the week. Spoiler, I won. And Zach Thornton would have gotten his first major league win, but that didn't happen because of that botched play. So, I hope Lindor turns it around. That's another thing that I want to watch happen in the second half. But he was bad this week, and we do have to call it like it is. So, Lindor, you got my El Stinko for the week. Last up, before we get into the chats, is weekly predictions. The standings now this season, as I said, yet another week, by the way, where it came down to the final Sunday and extra innings. That's the second straight week where that happened. I am now ahead 11-4 in the weekly predictions this season. Andrew's winning streak of 3 weeks has been broken. He picked 3-3 for this past week. I picked 2-4. I wind up being right at the gun. So my first win in almost a month. The All-Star break is coming up, but the Mets do get back into action on Thursday. They play Thursday, then they are off Friday again in Philly because of the World Cup, and then they play 2 more games on Saturday and Sunday. So it's just a 3-game series against the Phillies. And because I won the week, I get to go first, and I am picking 1-2. As you know, Andrew's not here with me this week, but he texted me his prediction after I won the week. He's going to go with 0-3. I can't blame him for going that way right now. It's hard to pick the Mets to have a winning week at any point, especially going into Philadelphia. They haven't played the Phillies very well so far this year in 2 series. So, yeah, we're both going for losing. Obviously, I think I have the obvious pick, but, you know, it wouldn't be shocking at all for the Mets to get swept going into the All-Star break and get swept coming out of the All-Star break. I would not shock me at all. All right, let's get to some of the comments. We actually have some super chats, so I'm going to get to those first. All from Brad. So super big shout out to our boy Brad. Brad writes, all the teams that started off slow or bad have started to turn the corner. The Red Sox comparison right there. But the Mets, they had so many chances to get to right the ship. Yeah, Brad. Honestly, it's kind of crazy because the Mets and the Phillies at one point, I think they were both 8-18 or 9-18, and the Phillies have had this huge upwards trajectory really since then. Obviously, that corresponds with them firing Rob Thompson, their manager, at the end of April. They also conveniently started getting healthy right around then. That's when Zach Wheeler came back, and he's been awesome. He got the thoracic outlet surgery. There's 2 different kinds, and one of them essentially kills your career, and that's what Matt Harvey got, Chris Carpenter, Chris Archer, a lot of those guys. Zach Wheeler got the other one, so he's been awesome again for the Phillies. They're 11 games over 500 now after being 9 or 10 games under, right, with the Mets. So they turned their entire season around. They're a game and a half out of first place. They're definitely, well, very likely to make the playoffs at this point. And now the Red Sox, who also fired Alex Cora either the same day or the same week as the Phillies fired Rob Thompson. And as of a few weeks ago, it hadn't sparked a turnaround. They were one of the worst teams in the American League. All of a sudden, the Red Sox have won 9 games in a row, which still has them under 500, but they are now only 2 games under 500 and a half game out of a playoff spot. So they have now seemed to turn it around, but the Mets have not. They unlike the Phillies and unlike the Red Sox, the Mets waited 2 extra months to fire their manager, and that may have been a mistake. I don't know that it would have turned their season around the same way that, you know, the Phillies and now the Red Sox are turning their season around, but, you know, it gives you more of a chance. The Mets had fired Mendoza so late this year that you knew they had already hit bottom to a point of no return. And, you know, at that point, there was really nothing that was going to change. Maybe they start playing better, cleaner, more fun baseball, I don't know, in a few weeks when they get used to green. But at that point, they're going to be in sell mode, and their roster is going to be even worse. So the Mets just waited too long to do it. And, you know, those 3 teams are very similar with the expectations coming in and, you know, somewhat notable off seasons, and all 3 fired their managers, but, you know, the 2 that fired their manager first, they've looked like they've turned it around, and the Mets haven't. So thank you, Brad. And I know you have a couple more here that we're going to get to right away. Another one from Brad. I said Sox got in 2 hours before Friday game, and the Mets still lost. Yep. I talked about that earlier. Like it was almost the second that I saw the Tim, I think it was Tim Britton or Tim Healy, the former Met beat writer. The second I saw him report that the Red Sox were stuck in Chicago and might not get to the game in time. I was like, if they play this game, the Mets will absolutely lose. And of course they lost. It wasn't even really close. Of course the Red Sox immediately scored 2 runs in the first inning because the Mets had a misplay in the field. Everything that you thought the Red Sox would do actually happened to the Mets. So very, very appropriate for the Mets to lose that game. Very appropriate that they lost a 12-run game or a game where they scored 12 runs on offense. Very appropriate that they lost the game the way they did on Sunday. Yeah, I forgot to even mention the airplane thing as like one of the reasons, one of the new ways that the Mets invent losing. They always find a way. And his last super chat from Brad before we get to the rest of the chat. McLean, Thornton, Holmes, Scott, Mania / Myers the rest of the year. Yeah, I'm good with that. I do feel like the Mets have kind of ruined Tobias Myers with the way that they've handled him this year. It's been very curious to me why they've handled him the way that they have. But yeah, I think that this is, if you don't trade Clay Holmes, and I would absolutely extend him. I think that's a guy that you want stick it around. He proved he can do it here. It's not an arm injury he suffered. It was like a freak injury to his leg on a comebacker against the Yankees. So if he's open to extension and the Mets are too, like I would absolutely do that unless somebody offers you a king's ransom. But again, like I would just rather keep him around because this team is going to try to be competitive in 2027. Doesn't mean they will be, but they're going to try. And, having a guy like Clay Holmes in that rotation, which is going to, have a lot of youth in it. And, maybe Tarek Skubal, maybe not Freddie Peralta. I know that it would be very helpful to have a Clay Holmes in there. He was the Mets' best pitcher this season before, he got really bad luck. All right, let's go through some of the regular chats. If any other super chats come in, those will go first in line, but I want to read a couple more before we sign off and get out of here. J Matrix Renegade 1971 says apt end of the first half. Yeah, it's very appropriate. It's very earned. The way like the Mets season ended last year felt like, yeah, that's probably the way it should have ended. It almost would have felt weird and undeserving to end in a champagne celebration. This first half ending in that way, not just losing, but losing the way that they did, very, very appropriate, I feel like. J Matrix with another one. This was commenting on the Steve Gelb's tweet that said it was a stunning collapse. Stunning collapse. Guy ate too many hot dogs. Yeah. Yep. Keith Overfield said the Mets are so bad they're impacting your ability to record the pod. Yeah, man. I wound up deleting the recording right away out of impulse, but if I could show you guys the face I made at the end of that recording when I realized that the audio hadn't been recording at any point, it looked like I watched someone got shot. I was in such a bad place when that happened. I couldn't believe it, and I was recording that at because it was to recap the Royals series, and I was gonna a lot of the like Lindor and Keith Hernandez and Nimmo stuff. I did talk about in what should have been last week's midweek show. So I was recording that on Friday morning at like 8:30 a.m. Before work because I wasn't able to do a live show the night before, and I wanted to get something in. So I was recording a pre-recorded episode right before my work day started and recorded 90% of it, and then looked at the screen and noticed certain things and was just like, you gotta be fucking kidding me. And at that point I'd run out of time. So it was like, all right, like this was coming out Friday anyways. I'm doing the show Sunday. Like I'll just fold this stuff into what I talk about on Sunday. So it wound up working out, but it's very, very frustrating. And that also felt very appropriate, Keith. Armand is amazing. Said, thank God the All-Star break is here. Amen. Keith with another one said, good news is the Mets won't lose another game until Friday. It's actually Thursday, but yeah, we get 3 days of no Mets games, which is nice. And then we get Friday off. So we'll take that. We'll take that trade. My dad with one said, don't forget about the ESPYs. I don't even remember what this was in regard to. Is the ESPYs happening at the same time as the MLB drafts? Did that happen already? I don't watch the ESPYs. Armand said, I wonder if the fans that chanted Nimmo and Alonso would still chant those names at the end of the season when the Rangers and Orioles missed the playoffs. Yeah, it doesn't seem like it doesn't seem like people care about that. Like it seems like people kind of have they've dug their heels into how they feel. Some might. I don't think everybody has an agenda who's like chanting for Nimmo and Alonso. I think that's disingenuous of me to say. But I think some people have dug their heels in on how they feel, and will defend it that point no matter what, and that viewpoint no matter what. And then I think that the people who have agendas are not going to change their mind. So I don't think it matters to those people what the Rangers and Orioles team results are. And look, it doesn't help that, it's not even that the Mets are like not going to make the playoffs. It's that they are catastrophically awful this year. I think that seems to be people's bigger problem. Armand with another one. Tierney saying Cohen was soft for not going on WFA, and he clearly misses being on the radio and the paycheck. Yeah, well, like I don't say anything deeper into that, but I don't miss the show. I'll tell you that much. I don't miss the show. J Matrix with another one. Too long, didn't read. The idea of trading Lindor is stupid. Absolutely. And shout out Armand, who, thank you, complimenting me on my Lindor rant / defense. A couple more, and then I think we can get on out of here. Another one from my dad. This team would be much different with PCA and Jet Williams on it. Yeah, I mean, I don't know about Jet. Has he turned things around yet in the minors? He was having a real rough year in the Brewers farm system. I want to see how that's gone. I mean, better than he was before, but Jet Williams 234, 341 on base at least, but 726 OPS, 9 home runs, 21 RBI, 41 RBI, 21 steals. Not a great start for Jet Williams in AAA. He's 22 now, so still young. And look, those numbers are up from where they were. I mean, they were much, much worse at a certain point this season. The PCA one is the one that's going to haunt us forever. It looks like a perennial MVP candidate in center field. When I was talking earlier about like teams don't trade good center fielders and shortstops because they're like quarterbacks. Whoops. This is what happens when you accidentally let one of those pieces go. Shout out Zach Scott for that one. Christ. Jesus. All right. I think that's a good place to end it. Thank you all for watching live with us or rewatching on the YouTube or listening on the podcast feeds. We really appreciate it. If you dug it, please like, subscribe, hype the video here on YouTube. If you are listening on one of the podcast apps, if you can give us a 5-star rating and review, it not only means the world to us emotionally, but it helps us in all the glorious robot algorithms that we are slaves to at this point. So If you can do that, we would appreciate it very much. No standard midweek show this week, but like I said earlier, I'll be back with a new episode dropping probably at midnight on Wednesday. First thing Wednesday morning, be me and Ernest Dove from the Dove Report to talk about Mets prospects, past and old. And then there will be a new Patreon episode at the end of the week as well. If you are a subscriber, if you're not, please consider it. New bonus episodes come out on the Patreon every couple of weeks. It's $5 a month. It also gets you access to our paid articles over on the Substack. So yeah, it definitely helps us out. But I will be on with Michael Barron, and we will be reacting to some trade proposals that fans send in. If you are a Mets Twitter OG, you might remember hashtag Barron trades. It's kind of the inspiration for that episode. So that should be fun as well to kind of start really kicking off the trade deadline content. Until then, thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. We'll be back on Wednesday. Normal show next Sunday. I think I'll be solo again because Andrew has Fanatics Fest, but I will be back on the feed many times in the next week, and we'll be talking about everything we want to talk about with Mets baseball. So until then, appreciate you guys. Let's go Mets. And yeah, the first half sucked. Second half can't be worse. So I'll see you soon.